Hey, welcome everybody. We're glad you chose some your precious time to spend it with us. Here, I'm John Bragger, the Commander of the United States Army Special Operations Command. I'm going to allow Peter and Raul to talk about, introduce themselves when they get up here. I'm going to hand the mic off to them, but I'm proud to stand on this stage and answer some of your questions here in a little bit with our coalition partners and with our academic and some of the best and brightest up there, because I think that's important when we're talking about innovation. Because it's going to require all of us to where we're going here for some of the threats that we're aligned against. I want to start off with a quote. Might not make my Brit counterpart happy, but I'm going to start off with a Napoleon quote. Hey, there's two powers in the world. This quote from Napoleon here: the sword and the mind, and the sword is always beaten by the mind. Innovation is a mindset. It's not a thing, it's not a widget, it's not an end state, it's a perpetual process. Perpetual process. And what I'm asking here is really a call to arms for the innovation cycle. And I argue, I submit, I posit that whoever is the fastest at the innovation cycle and the adaptability of new technology, new processes, it could be even old technology, and whoever adapts and innovates that the fastest will be the winner of the next war, or the current war, or the war after the war. And that's something we collectively need to work together on, whether in uniform, academia, coalition partners, defense industrial base, lawmakers, policymakers, are all responsible for part of that innovation cycle. So whether it's the new idea or someone else's idea, it's not always the one with the first idea, the adaptation of that idea, the employment of that idea on the battlefield, in the domain, against the adversary, the lessons learned from that employment, and the rapid innovation for the next phase of that, how tightly you can get that, I argue is going to be the winner of the next war. With the democratization of technology and the price point lowering, whether it's one-way attack drones, EMI jamming, coding, engineering, 3D printing, any one of those, whoever's going to optimize and adapt that technology faster is going to have the advantage in warfare. And then whether you're looking at, no matter which crisis you're looking across the globe right now, I think you can see it playing out across the Middle East, on the plains of Europe, and maybe future battlefields every day and every week. The speed of innovation is only getting faster. I mean, there's better experts in this room here who have been first-person witnesses to some of the innovation that happens on the battlefield of Ukraine. We're not talking months and years and programs of record. You're talking hours and days, from idea to concept to operator next to engineer to building it to flying it and getting it to the front line to make a difference in someone's life. And I challenge everyone here if we think that process is fast enough for this unity of effort here. And I posit that it's not. And we must do better. We must have a call to arms. We must challenge status quo. We must look at new technology, as old technology, perhaps employed in a new way, if we're going to optimize that innovation cycle. And that's who's going to give us the advantage when you're talking about the field of challenges the U.S. faces outlined in the National Security Strategy, or unpredicted foes of the future. And it's going to be inherent that we work together as a coalition, international partners, again, academia, all this defense industrial base around us, which I think it's important that we're having this conversation here, and as well as our policymakers. So I look forward to putting more meat on the bone and having that conversation, answering some of your questions. We can go deeper into what Army Special Operations Command is doing. We're not resting on any laurels. In fact, we're learning from others. There's people who are better at a lot of things than we are. But we're changing formations, we're changing our schoolhouse, we're changing our doctrine, we're changing our institution, everything from the creation of a technical warrant officer position, a tech integrator, and a tech innovator, new courses from robotics unmanned systems integration course, changing our 18 Bravos weapons course, including drones as part of that, as well as new formations like the Special Operations Robotics Detachment. So every facet of Army Special Operations is changing because warfare is changing. So I look forward to your questions, look forward to talking more about innovation as a mindset and telling you a little about what we're doing here. I'll hand it off to Peter next and look forward to the robust discussion.
Thank you, General. My name is Peter Bain, and I command the Army Special Operations Brigade in the United Kingdom. Thank you, General, for inviting me to take part in this discussion. And if I could just start by giving a personal thank you to you, General, for all of the incredible support that USASOC has given to my organisation, a relatively new part of the British Army, AUSA. It gives me huge pleasure that I got my people working alongside your people in Africa, the Middle East, and in Europe. And it's a relationship that is built on training, operations, conceptual development, and of course innovation, which is the topic of today. So it's as relevant as ever, and as a former NATO Secretary General who's now running the British Defence Review said, the enemy is not working business as usual. It cannot be business as usual for us. I'm going to address this topic from a UK perspective, and I'm going to talk about how the innovation mindset is the critical enabler for modernisation. And from a British perspective, it's really clear what we're trying to do as we modernise. It is to create fifth-generation land forces that set the joint force up for an unfair fight. That's what the Chief of the Defence Staff has asked us to do. And it's all about increasing lethality. So we sense twice as far, we decide in half the time, we deliver effects over double the distance with half of the munitions. So if that's the goal, that lethality gain, the way to get there is through an innovation mindset. And the General touched on this, but part of our inspiration is what we're seeing from operations in Ukraine, from our partners there. A smaller Ukrainian force with limited resources managed through stubborn resistance and very nimble innovation to make Russia pay a price far higher than it calculated. The Ukrainians have used technology, much of it very crude, developed right at the front to reach a 7-to-1 kill ratio in the initial stages of the conflict. They achieved this using technology to drive their entire campaign and not just niche special operations. Okay, so if that's the mission, if that's what we're trying to achieve, how do we go about it? Well, first, we're in a human business, so you start with a human being. For the US and the UK, that's where our competitive advantage has always been, and it's where it always will be. And I think there's a particular British slant to this, where often we perhaps lack the resources of our American colleagues. So we have to have this military mindset of hacking, of fixing, of being devious and being ingenious. So that's the kind of start point that we need to build on, but we need to take it to the next level. And as we prepare for the next fight, in the UK, we're talking about the concept of techcraft. So we all know what fieldcraft is. Techcraft then is about, as the General touched on, it's putting combat specialists that are soldiers next to the technical specialists that are industry engineers, putting them in close proximity, working together, and then doing that bilaterally with partners, whether it's the Five Eyes community, whether it's with NATO, and also doing it with partners who are in combat right now. So we relentlessly pursue technological advantage, and then we try and maintain it. And again, we can look to Ukraine for inspiration here. It's been well reported that the adaptation turnaround that enables drones to navigate through EW airspace is measured in weeks, not months or years. And military and industry are working together on what you might call the enigma challenge of this conflict, which is how you get drones on that last bound. What some people in the media talk about as the pixel lock challenge. Other examples then, much more simple, the turtle tanks went from FPVs where you get a two-way spiral innovation. So you've got to protect, and then they defeat it, and you protect again. And at the same time, you're trying to do the same to your adversary. You know, we could look in other domains of what they're doing on the Black Sea Fleet. Uncrewed maritime vessels, the Russians learn how to mitigate the threat, then they develop a way to get around it, and manage to defeat a naval force without a navy. So what is required then is a whole-of-society approach. It's about military working with civilians and industry, working together with our scientists. And what we really then need is to be comfortable with developing and deploying a minimal viable product to the battlefield in time that's good enough, and then doing the experimentation once you're there, and then being able to scale it up really rapidly. And that's not easy. So I'll bring my brief introduction to an end. I've talked about technology and I've talked about tactics, but actually it's about much more than that. It's about a whole mindset, and it's about our approach to operational art. So, you know, if we're in a fight, I'm going to defend myself. That's what we do, right? But actually, perhaps the best strategy, as we've seen from the Ukrainians, is actually to do something rather different, to create a problem or a dilemma for the adversary, ideally behind them on a different flank. And I think that's where our innovation needs to be focused. It's not just on solving tactical problems. It's about totally changing the nature of conflict. And so my final point is, and something perhaps we can unpack, and I could give examples from the UK. If we're going to make this work, it's got to be a top-down process, as well as the bottom-up process that we are familiar with, particularly in the special operations community. If it isn't top-down as well, it's never going to work. And so the whole defense, military, industrial ecosystem needs to change. And it needs to be characterized by a mindset and a culture where we think critically, where we're restless, where innovation thinking is encouraged, taking calculated risk is rewarded, and where failure is seen as a stepping stone to success.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Raul with MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I want to start by first saying a very big thank you, General Braga and Peter, for allowing me and giving me the opportunity to share the stage with giants such as you. Truly humbled to be up here and really looking to discuss technology or innovation as a mindset. And General Braga mentioned the best and brightest. Being at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, I wouldn't consider myself best and brightest. I am just a little bit bright. I work with a lot of people who are much smarter than I. And it's also a couple of key points that I'm hoping that we can, to bring back. Things really you touched on. Really, the people being really key to this, and also the need for us to bring a whole of society for us to be successful. But that really starting with a call of arms to everyone out here. So here, representing MIT Lincoln Laboratory, but really the call to everyone out here who is an innovator, who wants to be part of the ecosystem. And as part of this, I'm going to discuss just a couple of things that we have been working with General Braga and his team along the lines of the innovation as a mindset. So really, I want to start by addressing just a couple of points. By the ability for us to innovate faster. We're not just talking about us being able to come up with widgets that folks forward might be interested in. I think it's a little bit more than that, or I should say a heck of a lot more than that. It's really enabling us putting the building blocks to enable strategic agility for faster response. And that faster response has to be aligned with the mission needs forward. And so going through that, we need to, again, bring in that whole of society. And how can we do that in a fast way? And how can we also ensure that whatever it is that we come up with is something that is sustainable, and it is something that also becomes part of the institution versus just being individual things that we each in our corner doing. And so that is part of the work that we've been doing. And really, as I started to prepare for this, I started to think, what are some of the things that I would come up here and say that people don't already know? And I will go by saying, anything that I'm going to say, you're probably already aware of it. But I will go ahead and say it anyways. First, starting with, how do we move faster? And the ability for us to move faster, we take something like the Army. The Army is very big. Hopefully, if I say this, I'm not going to get booted off the stage. But being big, just like any big organization out there, you are really, really set forward efficiency and also efficiency and you also being sustaining. So those elements that enable you to be efficient are also in a way some of the same things that prevent you from moving very, very fast. And so for us to be successful, we have to not only have the institution that is still very efficient, but we also have to establish the networks that enable us to experiment and move very fast. And that is what we've been doing. And we have some efforts that we've been putting in place. You've probably all heard of the battle labs. Now there are battle labs going on at every single theater that is out there. And one of the elements that we're working with General Braga and his team is actually us putting in place. We changed the name a little bit, to battle labs, a lot of those out there. So we're now referring them to theater forward for Theater Edge Innovation Labs, or TEAL. And this is built on several years of us starting at a small scale where we have folks that are embedded with various elements within SOF and really coming up with a way for us to, how do we, from the nerds at MIT, come up with ways to really be able to have communications with the warfighters, starting first with, instead of us going with, here is something that I need, how can I have communication where I'm starting to step back and trying to first even understand really what are the challenges that you're trying to solve. And from innovators, we always jump into tell me what you need and I'm going to build it, when more often in the beginning, at least as we started this a couple of years ago, a lot of things built that never really were moved forward because we built what we were told to build. We didn't really take the time to understand what the challenge and really do some very quick analysis to really figure out how to go about those. Some of the other elements that we learned, really that constant interaction with the warfighter has been very, very key. You tell us what you want today. As nerds, you go back into your bat cave. Within a couple of weeks, you forget what the warfighter wanted, and several months later you show back with a left-swinging bat when what they wanted was a right-swinging bat. And those are some of the issues, again, going through and really trying to understand how can we, from the innovation sector, really start to learn a little bit more how to work with the soft elements, how to ask the right questions, and how to maintain that constant presence with them so that we can eventually become a lot more efficient at providing them with the capabilities that they need. And those are some of the things that have helped us with some of the elements. And what we are also doing now is building on that, where for us to be successful, it doesn't just have to be the capabilities that we're developing that is needed. We also have to look at it at various echelons. And so that innovation has to happen at the various echelons, as I mentioned. And one of the examples that we've been putting in place is a program called SOCOM Ignite, where what I just discussed with what we've been working with some of the soft elements at a small scale is capabilities that they need right away. The other one is us taking a step back. How can we start to introduce innovation even at the military students level? And so that is, again, SOCOM Ignite, a huge opportunity where we go out to the various soft elements, we get challenges, and then we pull military students from across the country to work with us on those challenges. And so you're all of a sudden introducing them to soft, but also really working with them on how to address problems. And this is now something that hopefully will enable us to not constantly be reactive, but actually becoming more proactive as we move forward. So if you look at some of those examples of projects that we have that have been very successful, as we move forward, General Braga mentioned a call to arms. This is not something that MIT Lincoln Laboratory, we can do alone. They have been successful. How can we enable those to be duplicated or replicated all across the country is one of those calls that we're making to everyone out here. And one of the other elements that I wanted to touch on is with the technical innovators, the folks that we're putting forward. That is something that is very huge for us, but it is also something that has to happen at multiple echelons as well. And one of the formats that we're taking is folks that are forward, but that back corners is something that is going to be very, very critical. While we have folks forward, we have a team that's already deployed, and I'm also going to be traveling tomorrow to visit various parts of Europe and then also to the Pacific so that we can first start to identify all of the various islands of excellences that are out there. A lot of people doing a lot of things out, but unfortunately we don't communicate very well across the various silos. We each have our own excellence area somewhere. And so how can we, again, back to that call, how can we start to really generate a common operating picture of the various innovations of excellences that are out there and be able to tie all of those together so that we can move a lot faster? And so I'm here to also mention that in terms of really that innovation, not just about some of the things that we can push out very quickly, it is really that mindset. It is really us being able to lay out the various processes that enable us to have something that is repeatable, something that we can distribute all across, something that enables us to work with our partners. That's why we're here with Brigadier Baines. And also pulling from all of the ecosystems that we have here within the US for us to be very successful. So hoping that I was told to keep it brief. Hopefully I wasn't too long, but just providing just a couple of examples, work that we're doing, some of the things that we're doing moving forward. And again, if you're interested in being part of that whole of society ecosystem that we're building, with putting the various tech innovators forward, embedding them with the warfighters forward, and then having that reach back corners for us to be all come together and be able to support them and make this enable us to become institutionalized. Versus us each being within our foxhole and doing our own development. Please do let us know. We do need all the support that we can get. With that, thank you.
Okay, look forward to your questions. Front row, right here.
How do you overcome the bias of, I go forward to the unit, they tell me they need something done, I go back to my company, I get some IRAD, I come out there, I build it. And it says exactly what we want, and I say, okay. And then they go back to the battle lab or the other institutional systems that are in place and go, we didn't invent that. Now I'm being a little bit caustic there, but that's a problem. I mean, I got a lot of great stuff out there that I'll share with you, and they love it in the unit. But my point is, I went to the unit, in the unit, worked with those sergeants, worked with those warrant officers in the unit, took the equipment that they had, built what they wanted, done. But then to be able to bring that, as you described correctly, and be able to promulgate that through the force is a real challenge that I think if we're going to move faster, sir, if we're going to innovate, we need to reward those guys. Yep. Because what happened is they took the vehicle and sent it over to PDO yard because there was nobody to sustain it, and it was chewed up. $200,000 worth of chew up. And my company told me, you'll find another job.
Well, I'll start off apologizing for that vignette of misuse, perhaps your time, your resources. But it spirals to a larger conversation. Can we afford that? Yes or no? Not from an individual human aspect, but from a overall national security aspect. So we don't claim to have it figured out how to flywheel into the larger. Everyone knows about everything from the Valley of Death to the responsivity, but what we do believe in is the co-location of the designers, the engineers, the companies with the consumer for that direct feedback loop. That's what we think works. I think the co-location is important, and then we owe you a better answer how to flywheel to the larger process and body out there. I think that's where we're looking for ideas to better do that. I think it's where the Chief of Staff of the Army is when he's talking about flexible funding and the like there. And there's a place for large program of records for large systems like that. And then I think there's a place too for the smaller level rapid innovation cycle that needs to happen. And there's certain, SIBRs and AppFit. There are different processes out there. We need to do a better job on that. But I would say what we three believe in, correct me if wrong, though, is the physical co-location and the culture change of oversharing. So that's oversharing internationally, that's oversharing in the U.S. government, and then a different paradigm is sometimes, businesses have your own risk that I'm not a businessman, but I know you have to make profit to be in a business, or you're not a business. And that's a scary risk thing of sharing proprietary or at least building something that can flywheel and have an API solution to work with something else. And that's different. So a lot of this is we're talking about is culture and not law, in my opinion. And are we willing to balance the patriotism with profit, there to collectively go farther and faster, quicker? That could then hopefully spin off to other things that are beneficial to the business world or the academic world, certainly the military world. But please jump in, Raul, Peter.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that example did work for you. I mean, there are some examples of where it does work, and that rapid innovation at the lowest level works. But I mean, it comes back to the point I raised earlier, that this is only going to be transformative if you have the top-down reform. So we got structures, as the General said, that is designed to produce programs of record over 10 years. And we still need those, because you can't produce a fleet of tanks or helicopters without it. But we have an institution that is designed to support that. We're trying something in the UK, in the British Army at the moment, to try and turn that on its head. And it's about a project in Estonia, where we're trying to flip, in line with Sakur's direction, the forward land forces from a strategic tripwire to a sort of AI-fueled regional strike force, an advanced force that can raise up a lethal barrier. To do that, the approach was pretty innovative and turned some of our processes on the head. So it was exactly as Raul said. It's about setting a challenge to industry, not a set of requirements. There's a number of times where we've set requirements and then you'll get something that's exactly what you asked for and you realize you asked for the wrong thing. So share with industry the challenge. So this was put to industry about a month ago. The returns need to be in within a couple of weeks, and delivery needs to start in January to be fielded in the summer. And we'll see how that goes. But we do not underestimate the challenges that we face institutionally, and some of them are legal and cultural.
I'll tell you, your comments, sir, I think the only thing I was trying to emphasize, the other thing, most people don't let me have a microphone. The only thing I was trying to emphasize is that, and I was really talking to the point of where the innovation takes place. And I couldn't get TDY money to bring soldiers to the lab, but I could get TDY money to take me and my engineers to them and in their motor pool underneath a shade tree by Building 40 at 1st Marine Command headquarters is where we built it. And my only caveat to everything that you said is that I would encourage you to go forward into the unit and build it there, because it's just it works.
And again, truly sorry to hear of your experience, and you're absolutely correct. Going forward and building it there is at least the past 6 years that we've been doing this with the smaller, at the smaller scale. That is how we've been successful, and really now starting to bring that up and bringing the whole coalition so that we are all together and coming up with those innovative ideas and building all. And we do definitely need the whole process put in place so that we don't run into these types of issues.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, Sean Hellenbeck, retired Army physician, ground and air in SOCOM. And the #1 cause of preventable death on the battlefield is hemorrhage where you can't compress it. I worked with a small company. We've tried and tried to get a requirement for an auto injector for TXA. Put in proposals, BAA, SOCOM, Ignite. It's not a requirement. And I think everybody here knows the #1 requirement should be saving a life on the battlefield. We're spending millions on equipment, and it's done. And there's 2 problems left. One, our American FDA takes too long. So if some other country has an FDA version that wants to help us, come find me. And then we'll bring it in as a NATO ally to defeat our FDA. We finally did it, but it's not a requirement, sir. And it was the one thing we couldn't solve in Iraq and Afghanistan. We came together as an innovation team, and we can't advance it. What do you recommend?
Well, I'd like to follow up with the sidebar afterwards to make sure we're not missing connectivity there on the requirement. Sounds like we may have a requirement for there. And being part of the community, much of from the CAT-T tourniquet to whole blood transfusion, which we leverage some of our NATO partners. I see some of them here who are ahead of it, who had different rules in different governments. That's part of that coalition, international coalition. I think we have to systemically address the problems. We know the need is there. So if I could get deeper afterwards and make sure that we might be able to connect on there, I mean, it sounds like a winner, but I'm not you, I'm not a doctor, but I got plenty of good doctors who work for me, and I'll link you up afterwards with one individual sitting 3 chairs from you. Another question? Yeah, yes, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time here today. I'm a recently departed Army civilian from Army Futures Command Network cross-functional team, and I just 2 years ago, I joined a technology company, and I was in the fight with a lot of folks, you know, going to the brigades and talking to them, much like this gentleman does, is from industry. But I did it from the government side, right, looking at their problems. And one of my big questions is with commonality from a coalition perspective. So this is where my question comes from. And I know when you're talking innovation, you have to look at different, you know, countries doing different things with their communications equipment. And a lot of time I hear from the soldiers that there's disparate communications, and you don't have necessarily the linkage for transport mechanism, et cetera. Not to mention crypto and other things, but just from a signal standpoint, you know, we see that there's a lot of disparate communications, and it's kind of tough to communicate, and you're not going alone. As you mentioned, sir, the reason why the UK is here, we're going, you know, to battle together as a coalition. So can you address what you're doing now to kind of lessen
Sure.
that gap?
Yeah, absolutely critical in the battlefield. I know that the chief is very focused on this with C2 Next. I can tell you the journey from Army Special Operations Command for over a decade and a half has really embraced software design radios and also device agnostic, transport agnostic communication philosophy and encrypting the data, perhaps sending it in different ways and different means, but also making sure we flywheel and are interoperable with other C2 systems out there. We have a solution we do use, and it's more of a concept, but a modular mission environment that we've developed at Army Special Operations Command that is being used around the world, that is being used with coalition partners, where we've ingested the Brits, for instance, 2 years ago at Project Convergence, and show up with your own radio and then still be able to provide a Link 16 firing solution and pass data for a sensitive shooter problem set there without weeks of advance and setting up servers and all this other stuff, this fakeness. So that's the path that we have gone down. Yes, we still need data transport radios and the rest out there. That's part of the solution as well. And would love to get in a deeper conversation with the gentleman sitting in front of you there, Luke Van Antwerp, head of our Force Modernization Center. And he's the kind of the focal point for any of this discussion about the med and that. But we absolutely see it as it has to be interoperable. I don't care if you're talking drone integration, C2 passing, when you're talking about comms-integrated environment and sensor to shooter, the only way we face on these adversaries, the size, scope, and scale, is going to make sure we are integrated and interoperable, which again gets down to culture. The ones and zeros part, you guys know that better. You know you could solve it in a minute and have this radio talk to this thing and pass this data. It's more culture, it's risk, it's business risk, political risk, it's sovereign risk at times, but this is the challenge we're saying. We have to work this together. It has to be integrated, has to be interoperable. The floor.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's my single biggest focus as the brigade commander on how we take this forward. And actually, I think it's an area where we've been quite successful. You know, about that digital network from the Ranger and the Foxhole through the multiple levels of command, all the way back to national capitals, and to be able to exchange data with allies at the right classification, which can be different classifications depending on who you're talking to. And doing that all over barriers of opportunity, from GSM to Starlink to military radios and so on. So we got a pretty clear idea of what we want, and the General mentioned it, through Project Convergence. We're doing that hand in glove, particularly with the United States, but also with other Five Eyes partners. I think that's a really good example. So on Project Convergence, we actually had the technicians, the scientists with us, and we were able to, on the exercise, reprogram the radios, reconfigure bits of kit that perhaps the people who manufacture them didn't understand that we might be able to do, and then feed that back so that the next iteration of it makes that sort of come with the device. So I think it's a good example, and thank you for raising it.
Sir, Major Moreau from the French Army Aviation. So my question is about the innovation as a culture infused in the military forces, because we talk about the industries, the academics that help, but it's from the outside, and sometimes the best ideas come from the inside of the system. But we know the Army is not the best system to let people, think out of the box. So how do you infuse the innovation as a culture within the forces, and I think particularly of the school, like the commanding school for the officers or everything. How do we make them think out of the box when all their lives they had to just follow orders? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I hope, at least for special operation, we attract the risk takers and think perhaps a little bit differently. I look at our charter, really. I mean, we talk about the Rangers having an Abrams charter. I look at a larger soft charter of innovation to the larger Army and Joint Force. We need to be innovating, and we are innovating and flywheeling on behalf of the United States Army of how to help out with being pathfinders on different journeys. And we've been very entrusted working with Army Futures Command and the Chief of Staff of the Army to be able to lead in a couple different concept areas for the United States Army to help that. So I feel very empowered to take those risks. And when you meet our people, going back to our people, I was recently 3 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago in Europe and looking at some of our support to Ukraine. And I get to meet one sergeant first class who is not, again, going back, we don't have drone MOSs right now. But this guy, I'll just say, he worked on a circuit board that he self-built to fix some of the terminal guidance issues that I hadn't seen from multi-million-dollar corporations. We have the right people. We have the people who embrace innovation and mindset in Army Special Operations, and I think we have them across the United States Army, but we haven't set up the process to entrust them, embrace them, empower them, and resource them. We've got to resource them. I think we need to look at different flexible funding that the chief talks about that allows for areas of risk and experimentation. They all might not work. If you take drones, for instance, I mean, our aviation culture is to make sure we do not lose one of these aircraft ever, and it's zero defect Army or zero defect process. That is not the culture we need for drones. These are disposable. They need to be attritable, throwaway. They need to be asymmetric, game-changing, and they need to be affordable, which they're not. Okay? Asymmetric, attritable, affordable. And we've got some culture changes due to get there, but we empower our people in Army Special Operations. The best thing we got going is just our people. People are our platform. We have very expensive helicopters, radios, weapons, you name it, but people are our platform. We embrace them, and we're going to get hooked here, so I'm going to pass it off. Anything you want to add? Closeouts.
Oh, so yeah, I was just going to say people as the platform. From the innovation side, us on the outside, those are the types of people, the people that General Braga just mentioned. People who are very, very dedicated, get very excited about innovation, and you pair them from within the Army with some of the scientists that we have out there in the academia and industry, and I think you have a winning team. And within SOF, you have a lot of those people in there.
I think, as the General said, there's a reason that the Special Operations community is addressing this topic. We got the right people, we got that right culture. It's now just permeating it through the whole organization. And as I said, it needs to be a top-down process married to that bottom-up innovative process, unleashing the potentials of our soldiers who absolutely love it. Just making sure that permeates the whole of the military-industrial ecosystem.
And I understand that's the challenge going forward. We have to challenge all our collective blind spots. If anyone thinks the process is optimized and harmonized right now, I'd ask, would the results in Ukraine or elsewhere be different for the past 2 years? So I think we never know when the game's going to start, and we have to challenge and question every status quo there is out there, from process to policy to technical innovation to business relation practices, you name it. We're in it. If you want to talk sidebar about individual things, we're your Huckleberry. We got Luke Van Antwerp right there, sitting there in the third row. And if you want to join international coalition and growing unity of effort of good versus evil, come on and join us. We'd like to go on that ride for you. So thanks for coming to Innovations Mindset. Look forward to any follow-up discussions you got there.